What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Shifting Lanes, and for this one you find me with the 2022 BMW M240i xDrive. This one is finished in one of the best paint names ever, Thunder Night Metallic. It has a black interior with the aluminum tetragon trim, and with all of the packages and destination charge, this M240i xDrive dials in at $59,645. And in this video, I'll give you my likes and dislikes about this small but mighty BMW so that you have a better idea before you buy. This M240i is on a new generation of the 2 Series cars. This is the 2 Series Coupe model, which is drastically different than the 2 Series Grand Coupe because that's a 4-door design and it's also front-wheel drive. This 2 Series Coupe is rear-wheel drive based, and this M240i only comes in all-wheel drive, or what BMW calls the xDrive. This new second generation 2 Series Coupe platform is bigger, wider, and slightly lower than the first generation. The wheelbase is 2 inches longer and the overall height is 0.1 inch lower than the previous M240i. Most importantly, the front track has grown by 2.5 inches, while the rear has increased by 2.4 inches. This is also making more power with the retuned 3-liter turbocharged inline-6 B58 engine. It now makes 382 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. That's a gain of 47 horsepower, and if that number seems familiar, it's because the Toyota Supra uses this same exact engine, and for their 2020 to 2021 model year change, they also experienced the same power bump. And to see even more similarity with the Toyota Supra, the base BMW 230i model is equipped with a 2-liter turbocharged engine, making 255 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. And that also happens to be the same hardware found in the Toyota Supra 2.0 model. I guess what I'm trying to really get at is that Toyota should have used this platform instead of the Z4 to bring back the Supra name, because this is a 2+2 configuration, just like all the old Supras, but I digress. Attached to the engine is an 8-speed automatic transmission from ZF. Sadly, there's no manual transmission available for this vehicle, but this automatic transmission is really good. Shifting is lightning fast. It's almost as good as a dual clutch transmission. It might be even better. And this transmission also has something that BMW calls the sprint function. Basically, if you press and hold the left paddle, it'll jump down to the lowest usable gear. This is a big time saver because if you're cruising on the highway at 8th gear, you don't want to waste any time bumping down the left paddle 4 or 5 times to get into the right gear. Just press and hold and it's going to bump you down to 3rd or 4th gear, again making that peak torque so you can make that last minute pass. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Myself and the rest of the Shifting Lanes team would greatly appreciate it. This transmission and engine combo is really a match made in heaven. Fuel efficiency is unreasonably good for the amount of power this engine is making. 23 city, 32 highway, and 26 miles per gallon combined. With mileage like that, it makes me want to keep this car in Sport Plus mode at all times. And so you should, because this car feels like it's ready to be unwound every time. There's very little turbo lag in this car, and that has a lot to do with the twin scroll aspect of the turbocharger. So there's no wasting time before you get to peak torque, which happens between 1800 and 5000 RPMs. And I also love that when you're in Sport Plus mode, it will proactively downshift under braking. So that helps in making this easier to drive fast because it'll always be in the right gear. 0 to 60 is a cakewalk in this car. With launch control, this will consistently get to 60 in the low 4s. That's a bittersweet fact about these ZF 8-speed automatic transmissions, or any modern automatic transmissions for that matter, because it's always going to shift faster than you shifting in a manual transmission. As for handling, this M240 makes me dislike crossovers even more. It's hard to fathom why small cars just like this one are dying out in favor of big and lazy SUVs. Cars like the M240i reminds us how much fun small cars can really be. When you attack the back roads, here's where the increased track width pays dividends. Combine it with the xDrive all-wheel drive system, the wider 245mm tires from the 19-inch wheels, and the M Sport differential, which is an electronic limited slip diff, you have plenty of grip for days. There's a lot of road holding potential here. You really need a track to fully realize its capabilities. But in the Twisties, the M240i feels fully competent. It feels like there's glue between the chassis and the road. There's very little body roll, and the seats are crazy supportive that you're locked in with what the car is doing. Even when there's surface imperfections, the chassis doesn't get too upset. The suspension dampens it out quickly, so you maintain a good contact patch with the road. The ride suffers a bit as a result. This is not a comfortable car. Even in comfort mode, this car still feels very high strung. I do like that when you're in comfort mode, the transmission feels a bit less manic. So when it's trying to shift, it does it in a more smooth fashion, so you don't get a lot of shift shock. So that's a bit better for daily driving or when you're doing long commutes. As for the brakes, they are really good for road purposes. There's a good amount of pedal feel, and there's plenty of overall bite and stopping power. And the steering has pretty good feel and feedback, although it could use a touch more damping force and maybe a quicker ratio to really make this feel like a proper track weapon. Overall, the steering is decent, but there is room for growth, potentially for the eventual M2. Moving on to the styling of the M240i, compared to the last M2 or the last M240i, this one looks like it's legitimately angry about something, which is appropriate because it matches the driving feel of the car. The front end has been spared from looking ridiculous by having a properly sized kidney grills. The headlights, the brake ducts, and the lower grille looks more angular and chiseled, which is nice because I thought the previous two series looked a bit too soft. When you take a peek at its sides, you'll notice the byproduct of the wider track. The bulged wheel arches give it a wide body look. The side view mirrors have been given the M treatment, and perhaps the extra wings on there help with the wind buffeting, because this is one of those cars that won't hurt your ears or head when you drive with the windows down. The door handles are integrated so it looks more aerodynamic, and down below there's a large serving of black on the side skirts and the rear bumper. It looks weird. This Thunder Night metallic paint hides it well, but I think it'll stand out like a sore thumb with lighter finishes. What this black section does though is it makes the overall car look lower and more athletic, so that's a good thing. And at the rear, the M240i looks a bit on the cheap side. The diffuser design looks like it was tacked on last minute. The dual exhaust tips don't scream performance car, and the taillights doesn't look like it fits with the overall design. The rear end just doesn't match the aggressive looks of the front, and I think this design tells me that there's eventually going to be a more hardcore version that will look better than this. They just had to start somewhere, and this is it. Moving inside, the interior feels like a proper driver's car. The seating position is great, and the ergonomics of the steering wheel, the paddles, the gear shifter, and the pedals feel just right. The infotainment system is your typical iDrive system, now in its 7th iteration. There's an 8.8-inch touchscreen display and also a rotary dial, which makes navigating through the menus a breeze. There's also a 12.3-inch fully digital instrument cluster that looks crisp and clear, and then there's a heads-up display to keep your eyes on the road. The steering wheel has all of the nice shortcut buttons on the spokes, and I love that there's a heated steering wheel button on the actual steering wheel itself. The only issue I have with the steering wheel is that there's no perforations on there, so while you have plenty of grip with the leather, your hands will quickly get clammy and uncomfortable when you hold it for too long. The seats on this M240i feels really great. There's a healthy amount of side bolsters in here, again, to lock you in during that hard cornering. There's also a lot of adjustability here for that perfect seating position. The one very minor complaint I have with the seat is the placement of the stitching. If you're wearing shorts or thin pants, the seam pokes your leg and butt cheeks in odd places. As for the back seat, it's actually usable and comfortable if you're on the short side. If you're tall, then yeah, you don't want to be back here for a very long time. And that's completely appropriate because this car was made for you, the driver. I really had a big blast driving this M240i for the week. This car reminds me a lot of the Toyota Supra, and it should because it's sharing a lot of the same hardware. It's not as bonkers, but it can still provide a raw driving experience, and this car just begs you constantly to have a little bit of fun on the back roads. If you're on the fence about this M240i, in my opinion, it's still worth getting because the price is right on par for the driving experience. Just keep in mind that this is not the most comfortable car to daily drive. If you're on the older side, the stiff ride might get a bit tiring after a while. It is a big bummer that this car doesn't come in a pure rear-wheel drive experience or in a manual transmission. This is just an M240 after all. It's not the M2, so there's plenty of room for growth there. If you're an M car enthusiast and have a bigger budget to spare, I'd say skip out on this one until the next M2 comes out. But for everyone else, this M240i is already pretty damn fantastic. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave your comments down below. If you've learned something from this video or found it entertaining, please consider hitting that like, subscribe, and especially that notification bell so that you can be notified anytime we make a new video. Let's wrap it up right there. My name's Hanson. This has been the 2022 BMW M240i xDrive, and I'll see you in the next one.